Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's community of practice session. These sessions are designed to provide resettlement stakeholders like you all, so those working directly with refugees and newcomers, with actionable tools, strategies, and insights to address housing challenges. So together we'll collaborate and share knowledge, discuss obstacles, and work on practical solutions together. By bringing together case managers and housing experts and other professionals supporting newcomers, the housing community is of practice aimed to foster dynamic discussions and empower you to navigate housing systems more effectively. My name is Zoe Atkins, and I'm the manager here at Refugee Housing Solution. And today's session will focus on an introduction to the HUD Housing Counseling Program, where we'll explore how HUD-certified housing counseling can support resettlement efforts, empower newcomers, and address housing challenges within our communities. So just some general housekeeping, please keep yourselves muted. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hands or drop them in the chat. And we will have some time at the end for questions and have a interactive discussion session throughout. So today's speakers are Jeremy Hayes, the Housing Program Officer with Church World Service, and Lizzie Goddard, our Housing Innovation Officer at Refugee Housing Solutions. Jeremy Hayes is a Housing Program Officer on the Housing Network team. And prior to serving in this role, Mr. Hayes worked as a housing locator at Tavor Community Services and Church World Service. He's also worked as a housing counselor at Base Inc. and is a HUD-certified housing counselor in addition to being a certified fair housing specialist through the National Center for Housing Management. He received his BA in political science from Millersville University. Mr. Hayes has used his education, experience, and certifications to ensure that all individuals and families have equal, equitable, and fair access to housing. He has developed and conducted fair housing trainings for a variety of audiences, including tenants, landlords, lenders, social service providers, real estate agents, municipal officials, and local leaders. These trainings integrate fair housing training with other relevant housing information, drawing community members and housing professionals to participate and increase their fair housing knowledge. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Hayes played a leading role in the Eviction Prevention Network, a key Lancaster County coalition that disseminates relevant housing updates, enables social service providers to connect their consumers with vital rental assistance, and provides regular updates to landlords and property managers so they are aware of available resources and restrictions. He was responsible for planning and executing events and special programs, promoting equal housing access for all individuals and households, including Tenfold's Fair Housing Summits. Mr. Hayes brings a focus on metric-driven program evaluation and program development. Lizzie Goddard is a housing strategist with more than 8 years of expertise forming dynamic partnerships to increase affordable housing opportunities for communities with challenges to accessing stable housing, specifically refugees and newcomers, persons who are unhoused, and households recently affected by a natural disaster. Lizzie has worked as a program officer in Greece during the height of the European refugee crisis as the housing manager at a resettlement agency in Nashville and a landlord engagement coordinator for Metro Nashville's Continuum of Care. Lizzie joined Refugee Housing Solutions as the Housing Innovation Officer in 2024 to foster newcomer access to affordable housing through the development of multi-sector partnerships and local pilots. Thank you both, and I will pass it over to Jeremy.
Thank you, Zoe, for that introduction. Today we're going to talk about HUD housing counseling. We are going to first try to understand housing counseling services, defining what that entails and its role in promoting housing stability, specifically for newcomers and refugees. We'll identify specific ways housing counseling services address challenges faced by refugees and newcomers in securing and maintaining housing. Then we will talk about how to navigate access to that housing support, locating and connecting with HUD-approved housing counseling agencies, and talk about some strategies to build and strengthen those partnerships between RAs, affiliates, and offices, and those housing counseling providers. Finally, we're going to explore some certification options, learn the requirements, processes, and benefits of becoming a HUD-certified housing counselor, and recognize how that certification can enhance the capacity of agencies and improve services delivered to clients. If at any time you guys have any questions throughout, feel free to put them in the chat as we go. And there'll be time for questions at the end too, so you can save them up. So first off, introduction to housing counseling. What is it? Well, first, we have to gain a clear understanding of its scope and what it is, and we have to learn how housing counseling can support our clients. So, what is it? Well, housing counseling is independent expert advice customized to the need of the consumer to address the consumer's housing barriers and to help achieve their housing goals. HUD's housing counseling program provides support to a nationwide network of housing counseling agencies. These are known as HCAs. These agencies provide information, advice, tools for consumers seeking financing, maintaining, renting, or owning a home. This information can be provided either in a one-on-one setting or classroom settings. Agencies also can assist those facing homelessness and homeowners in need of foreclosure assistance. There's a lot of different types of housing counseling. First off, we have rental counseling. This can include anything up to and including, right, housing location services. So agencies are able to help clients find housing that's suitable for them, that's affordable, sustainable, and habitable. They are able to educate their clients about fair housing and tenant landlord law. They can help them deal with tenant landlord issues stemming from fair housing and tenant landlord law, usually. Can span from any kind of rights and responsibilities issues, maintenance issues, lease review, right? They can help them understand what's in their lease, help them understand what their rights are, what a tenant's rights are regarding any particular situation, what a landlord's rights are, what their responsibilities are. Um, they can help budget as well. Budgeting is a huge part of housing counseling in general. And we'll budget to help make sure our rent gets paid each month, right? Make sure that our utilities get paid each month. Make sure we have money left over, right? Part of rental counseling can include homelessness assistance. These can be shelter and resource referrals. Um, they are able to help with finding Section 8 housing as well. Can't approve you for the voucher, but they can help a client who has a Section 8 voucher, find appropriate housing. And they're also able to help with eviction prevention, um, either with counseling with landlord-tenant intervention, or with arrearage payments. Helping pay forward rent if they know they're not going to be able to pay full rent the following month, or if they're already behind on rent. Um, these services depend on the agency that you're talking to, right? Not all of them are going to provide all of these services. Some will focus specifically on housing location services. Some will focus on specifically education services. So it really depends on the agency that you're talking to in your area, what services they provide, to what level they provide those services, and what kind of resources they have available. Next, a very large part of housing counseling, almost as large as budgeting, is home ownership. There's a saying in housing counseling that everybody is pre-purchase. Whether you have a 300 credit score, $10,000 in credit card debt, and and extensive things in collections, right? But you want to buy a house. You're pre-purchase. Same way somebody who has a credit score of 700 has $10,000 saved up for down payment, and has no debt, right? If you want to buy a home, if that's your goal, you are pre-purchase. So in pre-purchase counseling, they will discuss budgeting, how to save for that down payment. They'll discuss credit, how to obtain, maintain, and improve your credit. They'll talk about loans that are available, both federal and private, the differences between an FHA, USDA, VA loan, what a conventional loan is, what different banks offer, interest rates. They could refer to down payment assistance programs if you are, a first-time home buyer as well. They'll discuss insurance, and they will again discuss fair housing and also fair lending laws as well, in this process. Beyond that, we have post-purchase counseling, right? You have the home. What is there to talk about at this point? Well, um, you need to pay your mortgage. You need to make sure that you're paying your taxes, your insurance, your HOA fees if you're living in an area with an HOA. And going and counseling, housing counseling can help keep people on track with all of that. Making sure that if your local taxes aren't included in your mortgage payment, that you are paying them separately, that you have the resources to pay them separately. That you're developing maintenance plans, right? You own the home. You're responsible for fixing the roof, for fixing the furnace, for making sure your windows aren't leaking air so it's really cold in the house, right? So the housing counselor can help the client plan for these large expenses, right? Furnaces can be, five, six, seven, eight, $9,000 to replace, right? So we need to plan, we need to save, we need to figure out when we're going to replace that furnace, and they can kind of help you through those processes. Additionally, they can help refinance. If you want to try to refinance the home, they can help counsel you through that, right? Lock in that 4% fixed interest rate, right? Since they're going to drop any day now. They can help similar to eviction prevention, foreclosure prevention. That can be as simple as talking with your lender about, a repayment plan, or they can really get into the nitty-gritty of it all and help their clients through those actual loss mitigation processes, right? Each particular loan, each bank has its own process for avoiding foreclosure. If you've missed payments, getting back on track, and housing counselors can help clients do that. Um, a specific subset of post-purchase counseling that counselors need to get especially certified for is reverse mortgage counseling, but they can help with that too. Next. Just as important as rental or home ownership counseling is financial and credit counseling, right? So if you're fine, if your clients are fine renting, they're fine buying the home, they have a home, they're cool, um, but they want other help, right? They maybe don't have the best credit, or they always having trouble balancing the budget, or maybe they do have a good bit of debt. A housing counselor can help with that, right? They can do specific credit counseling, how to establish, how to improve your credit, help review your credit report to look for any inaccuracies on there. They can help with budget counseling, balancing that budget, right? Making sure that the client is spending their money in a way that allows them to save for a goal or allows them to pay off all of their debts and all of their obligations as well. Then we have debt counseling, right? That's credit card debt, things in collections, just helping people pay off that debt as effectively and efficiently as they possibly can. And then there's a debt. There's also if you have 20 or so maxed out credit cards, housing counseling can help with a debt management plan. That's the only service, again, depending on the agency, that might cost a bit of a fee to take advantage of. But every other kind of counseling service we've talked about so far is free of charge, right? A legitimate HUD housing counseling agency will not charge for their services. Just to make that clear. Next. One last thing, not the last thing, but well, last general area of housing counseling is disaster assistance. Um, One part of home ownership counseling is preparing for that disaster, right? So pre-disaster preparation, right? Counseling people on how to get, those ready go bags, how to come up with a emergency evacuation plan, right? Where are we going to go? Where are we going to meet? Making sure that we have the evacuation plans of our schools and offices. So if we're all in different places, our families are all in different places, we know what those plans are, and we can meet where we're supposed to meet. And then what are our family roles? Who's checking the news, who's making sure they're grabbing the go bag, who's calling other family members to make sure that they got out, if there is a disaster, right? What is the plan? What is our role? And then with recovery, post disaster, they can help with resources, with referrals, and it really assist with that relocation, rehousing, and rebuilding process. So, talked about a lot of services there. How can that help our actual clients, right? Well, you might not have a lot of clients coming in asking how to do a reverse mortgage, but you definitely have clients coming in asking about landlord tenant issues, right? Especially within that 90 day, right? We're dealing with tenant landlord issues daily. So, housing counselors can help with that rental education, that tenant landlord law. They'll be more versed hopefully in tenant landlord in your local state's tenant landlord law and your local state's fair housing law. There is a federal fair housing law, but if your state, your county, your municipality, township has its own fair housing law, they should be familiar with those as well. They can help really get in depth with budgeting. I'm sure a lot of us have CO classes that go over, I don't know, the 30,000 foot view of budgeting. You have to pay your rent, your electric, your water bill. The housing counselor can go much deeper into that about exactly how much money is going towards rent, how much money goes towards the electric bill, how much money is going towards entertainment and fun stuff, and can we save up? Um, they can help connect us with subsidized housing resources, right? I talked about Section 8, those housing choice vouchers. While they don't have the ability to approve anybody for a voucher, they may work closely with the housing authority that does and can refer clients to there. They can assist with that housing location process and navigating the local housing system. They can be an advocate for tenant rights. And then we can have home buyer education, right? The American dream is to buy a home. And as newcomers, as refugees come in, if that's a goal they have, while us as RAs, as case managers, as housing coordinators, might not have the expertise specifically on that home buying process, these housing counseling agencies do, and our clients are eligible for those services. Lizzie, go ahead.
Thanks, Jeremy. I've actually been taking Jeremy's housing counseling classes, so I can testify firsthand that he is an expert and an excellent teacher in all of this. So thank you so much for that overview. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to really just kind of take all of the wonderful information we just heard and spend some time thinking about how we could practically use housing counseling with our programs as they are, and even potentially as we all anticipate some shifts in the coming months. So I'm going to take us through a few case studies, and then we're going to do a bit of an interactive activity. But just to kind of make this applicable, for example, Khalid is a refugee from Syria who arrived 2 years ago. He's working full time. He's been renting an apartment successfully, but his dream is to buy a home, but he doesn't know where to start. He reaches back out to his resettlement agency who helped him secure his first apartment for help. So I used to be the housing coordinator for a resettlement agency in Nashville, and I'm sure this happens to many of you all. But I would have past clients who were RNP or I helped secure their initial housing placement. And people remember you, right? So they would be maybe a year or two down the road and either looking to shift apartments or even potentially buy a home, and they would reach back out to me. So this is a great example, one I went through myself, of where housing counseling would have been beneficial, either for myself to have been more trained up on this or to understand who in Nashville was offering these services for a warm handoff and referral. So a lot of the barriers we see, especially around home ownership, is limited understanding of the process in the US. It's confusing enough. I bought my first home this year and it was very confusing. So I can't imagine trying to navigate that if English isn't your first language, or you aren't used to all of perhaps the documentation. And also credit. I mean, credit comes up all of the time with folks when we're looking for rentals, hugely important in the home buying process. And then also just understanding how much would Khalid need to save up for a down payment. He might be a potential candidate for down payment assistance, and that's something a housing counselor could work with him on. And so the solution was he was able to connect with the housing counselor, and they were able to build that capacity, perhaps maybe more so than you guys have time for in your own day-to-day responsibilities. So it just adds in another layer of supportive services that can help folks, particularly folks that may be past that initial resettlement window. And then a second one, which may feel more applicable to your day to day. I know all of us are kind of on the front lines of educating and protecting folks against housing discrimination. But here's an example of Sarah, who moved to the US. The RA helped her locate that first apartment. But within her first year of tenancy, she started noting issues with her landlord, including that repairs were not being made in a timely fashion, dismissive comments about her ethnicity, and eventually a letter posted on her door saying that she needed to vacate immediately. So a lot of the barriers we see, folks, are just a limited understanding of what are your tenants' rights, not only nationally, but also at the state and local level. Um, Perhaps she was afraid that if she pushed back, that she would absolutely lose her housing, or that there would be, just even more housing insecurity. And then also lack of experience navigating legal disputes. So connecting with the housing counseling agency, they were able to provide education on tenants' rights. Something that I will flag that I find very important is because housing counseling is a division of HUD, they are legally required to offer materials for folks that have limited English proficiency. So if you see LEP on all of our programs, that's why. And so even if we're working with folks that may not be able to go and sit down and have a meeting without interpretation or translation, housing counseling agencies should be trained and prepared to use things like language line. They may have in-house translation services. So don't let that be a deterrent from connecting clients to housing counseling. And then they can help with those warm handoffs to maybe legal aid, mediation, and again, adding just another team to, Sarah's housing stability support. And there's also a lot of space for collaboration between the RA and that housing counseling agency. Perhaps you all, with your expertise with newcomers, can help support housing counseling agencies and strengthen their fair housing and tenants' rights protections for immigrants and newcomers in particular. All right, so you've heard both of us talk for about half an hour, which is great, but I know that it is late in the afternoon, and I hope that this will maybe wake us up a little bit. So I'm going to take us through a bit of a mapping activity. So I just shared a link in the chat, and I am also going to share my screen in case folks would rather just come off of mute and chat. So if everyone can open that up. Looks like the link is working. Let's see. Are you guys able to access it? I'm not seeing any guests in here, but let me.
It's asking us to
Okay.
sign up.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me change the permissions. I had it for the first one. Okay. Copy board link. All right. No one has to sign up for Miro. Don't fear. Unless you really want to. It's a really fun tool from my perspective. Okay, there we go. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as well. And then let me see if I can. There we go. All right, great. So just a 2-second tutorial on Miro if you haven't used it before. I am actually going to turn everybody's cursors off because I get a little seasick when I see everybody floating on the screen. So if you have not used Miro before, you can just click on a sticky and type something, hit click anywhere else, and it will save. If we run out of stickies, I will throw some more in there. But it's a pretty straightforward kind of prompt, but I think it can be helpful for us to just spend some time, again, practically thinking about of the services that we heard Jeremy describe, how does that potentially align or not align with a lot of the barriers and challenges that we're often tasked with supporting newcomers through? So I'm going to start us here in this first box. I'll zoom in a little. Feel free to populate yourself. Go ahead and get in there and type, or come off of mute, and I'm happy to put it in for you if you want to throw anything in the chat. So what are some challenges, topics, maybe a case you're working on right now that's particularly challenging? What are kind of some common housing themes that we run into in refugee housing? Okay, great. People are in there. And again, feel free to come off of mute as well. All right. We have language barriers, absolutely. Don't mind me if you see me moving some things around. Lack of credit history. We chatted about that. It can be tough, obviously, for initial renting, but also for future moves, future home buying prospects. Legal status affecting work authorization, which of course, if we don't have income, it's really hard to qualify for housing. No lack of rental history, that can be a challenge. I'm going to zoom in on some of these. Lack of knowledge in the US for landlords about different immigration statuses, absolutely. So a lot of times it's not just newcomers, maybe lack of knowledge of the US housing system, it's also our own housing providers that don't understand who has a legal right to housing and to work. No income, limited income. And also look at this. Corporate, yeah. I appreciate whoever put this in here. I feel this deeply. More and more corporate management companies with standard software that will screen out people without qualifying factors. I know all of us feel this. I've felt this a lot in my work of if there's not a real person on the other end to say, hey, here's my letter of support. Here's why I can't fill out these boxes in your system. It's really difficult to build in exceptions. Large family sizes, yeah, difficult to find affordable large units or single family homes. And then also too, we have the parking lot down here. I'm gonna start doing some matching and all of that. If there are things that are coming up that maybe are outside of the scope of housing counseling, I may scooch it down in there. Or also if there are things that you're like, I know probably housing counselors can't solve this, but it's something that we run into all the time. And I see folks putting in some stuff in the green as well, so that's good. So I'm gonna move no income and job down to the parking lot. Also limited income. Um, Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like from my experience, while housing counseling does not do any workforce development, they typically have an awareness, probably in the same way you all do, of workforce development initiatives in the city. So they may be able to offer maybe referrals or resources of other organizations that could help with that, but they do not specifically offer any type of employment opportunities. Does that feel right?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, they might have another department in their office that's
Mhm,
outside of housing counseling, and they can refer you to refer the client to education.
mhm,
I do want to point out the more and more corporate management companies one. I mean that falls in line with both rental counseling and fair housing education, just because if you know your rights as a renter, then they're less likely to be able to take advantage of you. And a lot of those software screenings can be discriminatory and
mhm.
possibly a violation of fair housing. So knowing both of those really ties into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeremy. I'm going to move no credit history over here. We have credit counseling. I think in some states, I believe it just became legal in Tennessee where you can actually opt in to have your rental payments go towards your credit score, which can be great, especially for folks maybe culturally or for religious reasons they're not comfortable having, lines of credit or credit cards, but they'll still have that positive rental or payment history and credit from making maybe utility payments or their monthly rental payments. So that can be something for a housing counselor who would know the local, laws on that and ways to opt in to build credit. Um, and then, again, the larger family sizes, I think that kind of goes into, and I would maybe even add agreement over here of, knowledge of, housing providers in navigation. So while of course we're doing our own housing navigation and landlord engagement, housing counseling agency may also have awareness of other affordable housing providers and offer some additional options. I'm going to move this down. Competing with, again, similar to, I think we could connect these of yes, it can feel scarce, right? There are a lot of people in need of affordable housing right now. One thing that I have found in some of the partnerships we've developed even in this last year at the national level is one of the benefits of newcomers and using things like match grant or other housing rental resources, or they are much less cumbersome than working with the housing choice voucher. They don't require the intensive inspection. You don't have to do all of your HAP payments and contracts. And so we found that working with some management companies, they actually prefer to work with newcomers because they don't have quite as much of an admin strain than accepting a voucher. So there's always a bit of that sense of competition, but I also think that there are folks out there that are happy to have a less cumbersome experience. Agencies unable to guarantee rent. I think that's where rental counseling can come in as well of, offering that education and support. And then language, we're gonna put ELT requirements here. So even if there are language barriers, we know that housing counseling has language accessibility required of it. I'm going to kind of move that down. Well, actually, I feel like that's also a fair housing. It does affect housing and employment. Anything else? Anybody who wants to come off of mute or put anything in the chat? And then just to focus again on the solutions, yes, all of these things, right? Identifying partners that are understanding. That's a lot of the work that we do, right? We understand maybe perhaps more than a housing counseling agency the particular needs of newcomers. But again, I think I would encourage all of you to consider building partnerships with those housing counseling agencies to where perhaps there's some cross training, right? Maybe you guys can explain to them and offer resources around newcomer housing needs, and in exchange, they're more prepared. And additionally, too, Jeremy is going to chat with us as well about even an opportunity for you all as housing coordinators to become housing counseling certified. And then again, we have that knowledge in-house, which can be fantastic. It can also open up some additional funding opportunities, which we are all eager to diversify right now. And Kara, yes, I see your note. Another barrier can be states that have limited tenants' rights. And absolutely, it can be a challenge, but particularly with newcomers, they're very often covered under federal and national fair housing protection. So even if state and local laws are maybe not as protective, those housing counseling agencies could offer expertise on how to advocate for tenants. I'm going to put that in. We have it. Limited tenant right. And also too, housing counseling agencies are going to stay up to date, right, on if there have been local policy changes, state policy changes, and can, again, help clients have the most recent information. All right. Any other thoughts, anything else? Again, things I've kind of shifted down to the parking lot are more around workforce development, employment, of course, always tied to housing, but not necessarily something a housing counseling agency could solve for. Oh, that's a really interesting. Nancy put in the chat, I heard that refugee travel loans actually show up as a positive credit score. I'm going to kind of put that in the parking lot, mostly just because I don't want to forget that you said that. I have not heard of that, but that would be fantastic. Have you come across that, Jeremy?
No, not directly.
Um,
I guess if they're reporting those as being paid off on time,
mhm,
then yeah, that would show up.
yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Nancy. I feel like I want to follow up and yeah, from our loan officer who is partnering with us. That's great. I feel like that's a best practice too. If there's anything on the RA side that we need to do to ensure that's getting reported, that would be a really fantastic resource for folks to build their credit right away.
We also have a comment in the chat from Julia. She said she's
Hmm.
also seen more landlords using that one software for rent payment that helps build credit, but unfortunately, she thinks that it has a monthly fee. But long
Hmm.
term, it's positive.
Yeah. And again, those housing counseling agencies would probably know the best way to connect to that. I do think there is something that does not have a cost associated that you can opt into for your credit reporting. But I think those are, again, things that in housing counseling they would be able to provide the expert opinion on. All right, fantastic. Thank you guys for your engagement in this. And then I'm actually going to spend just a few minutes. Feel free to click here. If you scoot your mouse over, there's another board with these pink stickies. Just to think about too, maybe potential next steps, right? Of how might we better connect newcomer households with local housing counseling services. If there are any thoughts, or if someone is already doing this, or this is stuff that you guys have already kind of worked through, I'd love to hear any stories as well. Mhm. I love whoever wrote this. So I worked in continuums of care for many, many years, and I live in Nashville still, and most of our refugee resettlement agencies are not continuum of care members, even though they are eligible, which I would love to see more RAs have membership in COCs. It's free, it's for anyone who's a housing stakeholder. And then you're also more aware of different funding opportunities and collaboration with any prevention agencies. So a lot of eviction prevention, a lot of emergency rental assistance funds, or even just being more aware of the local shelters, permanent supportive housing options for folks, voucher preferences. So, and typically a lot of the housing counseling agencies are going to be involved at the COC as well, since they work with a lot of folks who are unhoused. I like that idea. At discharge, leave clients with a flyer of local resources. Jeremy's going to show us in a second where you can look up all of your housing counseling agencies, running lists of emergency housing options. Great. Yeah. Yep. Housing counseling will very often show up on 211. I'll also do a plug RHS. We have a housing hub and directory specifically for newcomer housing resources. It's not national yet, but a few states we've got up and going, and they will list housing counseling services as one of the options. Thanks, Zoe. And another thing too, I'll just personally put in is, build direct partnerships um, between your local offices. Um, so like I mentioned, maybe doing cross training, being able to do warm handoffs. And then too, if there's cultural competency training that we could offer, or even say, hey, counseling agency, you really are struggling with landlords understanding immigration statuses. Perhaps they do webinars or lunch and learns or all of that, and maybe that could be a focus of some of their landlord-facing education. So I think there's a lot of benefit in kind of building those community collaborations. And I hope that this gives you guys a few ideas or maybe some inspiration to engage with your local counseling agencies, or even consider perhaps what it would look like to, again, maybe bring some of that in-house. So thank you all for hopping in there with me. We will likely share out kind of the summary of some of this if it's helpful, as well as the slides. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then I will hand it back over to Jeremy to kind of talk us through other opportunities for involvement.
All right. So we just went over how we might better connect refugee households to housing counseling services. So how do we access those ourselves? Well, we're going to learn how to do that exactly, and we're going to understand key considerations for how to integrate our R&P services, how to integrate housing counseling services into our R&P services. So there are about 1,500 housing counseling agencies nationwide. So there's probably one a little bit close to one of your offices. You can find them either calling the 1-800 number here, or that's the HUD Housing Counseling website link there. I was already sending out these slides later, so you have access to that. And that's pretty much how you find them. It's really easy to do it on that link. It'll ask you kind of where the area you're in, what kind of services you're looking for, and how far away you're looking for a particular housing counseling office. And it will give you the ones in that range with those services, which is pretty convenient. So then, how do we evaluate these agencies for partnership opportunities and interest? I mean, go to the next slide for that. Well, um, we need to know what services they actually offer. I talked about a bunch of housing counseling, different kinds of housing counseling. Not all of them provide all of those services. So we need to know which services that the agency closest to us provide. We do that by calling, by talking to those housing counselors, talking to those staff members, and seeing exactly what services they provide so that we can make good referrals. And then we want to try to do a at least some kind of warm handoff, either meet the housing counselor with our clients if possible, maybe go to that first appointment with them so that the client is comfortable, knows the office, they trust us. Now they can trust this other person as well. I want to keep in contact with those counselors, follow up, make sure we know what they're talking about with our clients, see where they need our assistance, where we can help, and make it a partnership. Maybe if you haven't sent a referral in a while, you just, send them a little Christmas card every now and then. Um, and then additionally down there, we have the HUD Exchange, which is a great website for you to access and look at. Um, that office, it's talks about everything that HUD, the Office of Housing Counseling, what they're doing, what they're focusing on, what trainings are coming up, and you don't need to have any special access to look at that, which is fantastic. Um, and incorporating it into our services, right? During the initial 90-day R&B period, we're gonna mostly focus on those rental and financial counseling services, right? The basics, how do we maintain our housing? How do we talk to our landlord? What maintenance are we going to do? How do we take care of the home? How do we budget? How do we save? Those are kind of things that we really want to focus on, as RAs. And when we're talking to, if we're going to refer a client to a housing counseling agency. Um, and these would supplement our own services, right? Not take over, but supplement. And then after that 90 day, PCOR populations, we can maybe talk about if a client comes to us, they like we in the example, um, clients come to us, they want to buy a home, and they knew who we were. We helped them with housing the first time. Maybe they can help us buy housing the second time. So we can refer them to a housing counseling agency for that pre-purchase counseling. They can absolutely still access that rental and financial counseling as well. They can get more in depth about different banks and banking systems. Talk about, really developing their credit. They have all the basics down. They know how to pay rent. They know how to save money. How do I develop my credit and get it up there? And every other service that a housing counseling agency can provide. Again, our clients are eligible for after those 90-day services. Especially if we don't have the time, we're focusing on new arrivals coming in, focusing on getting those houses set up, getting those cultural orientation, that actually doing those R&P services that we're required to do. We can refer these clients. So we still want to help, right? We still want to help those clients make sure they're successful, refer them to these agencies as well. So we talked about housing counseling agencies and housing counselors. You yourself can become a certified housing counselor. Isn't that fun? This includes 6 modules that are about 13 hours in length total. All 6 modules, 13 hours length. You go to that website there, HUD-housingcounselors.com, and you can start studying. You don't need any kind of, again, special designation, access, or anything. You can just start looking at those modules and studying. There is an exam that you need to take. It's a very difficult exam. But when you get a certificate, and that is your certificate, right? You take that with you personally. You can put that on your resume. You say, I am a HUD certified housing counselor. Um, and you are required, if anybody here is interested in having their agency become a housing counseling agency, you are required to have HUD certified housing counselors on staff. So they will need to pass this certification and become HUD certified housing counselors. Next slide. Benefits. If you don't want to become a housing counseling agency, right? The benefits of even just studying that material. It enhances your organizational knowledge and capacity, right? These 6 modules on there that I was talking about are financial management, housing affordability, fair housing, home ownership, avoiding foreclosure, and tenancy. So those 6 things, right? 13 hours, they will really take your case managers and your housing coordinators and give them a much broader knowledge of housing in general. If you do decide to become a housing counseling agency, there's funding available. You can then apply for additional funding from HUD that is only available for HCAs. And even if you don't become an HCA and you just certified housing counselors for fun, because it's a great time. It builds trust with landlords and community partners, right? Community partners, especially, they're going to know what you're talking about when you say, I'm a HUD certified housing counselor, especially in those COC settings. They know what you're talking about. They know what those are. They deal with HUD housing counselors and agencies a lot. And then landlords, if they don't know, you can educate them a little bit, let them know what that means, and you can let them know that I know what I'm talking about, right? I'm gonna put a client here and I'm gonna teach them the correct things, the right things that they need to know to be successful tenants.